Previously on Popping Collars.
So
wait, really quick. This is our 60-second episode, like the episode that follows 61 and is before 63, but it doesn't only last for 60 seconds.
I thought we were going to have to
It's a mini-sode. Everyone's doing mini-sodes now.
Okay, so should I say our 62th episode?
No, I think they got it.
All right.
Nobody has time to listen to a full podcast anymore.
No, my attention span can't even handle that.
And the show's over. Thanks for coming, everybody.
All right. Ready? All right, great. Welcome to Poppin' Collars, the podcast that lives at the intersection of religion and culture. My name is Betsy Gonzalez, and I serve as the head chaplain at Episcopal High School here in beautiful and cicada-ridden Alexandria, Virginia. With me is Greg Knight. Greg, where are you and what are you up to?
I am in non-cicada-ridden Palm Beach, Florida, where I'm the director of children and youth ministries down here. And I am currently prepping for a trip to England. I'm going to be walking 68 miles with 13 high schoolers from London to Canterbury. It's going to be great.
Also with us is Sarah Condon. Where are you and what are you up to?
We live in Houston, Texas, and I'm on staff at St. Martin's Episcopal Church, and I'm also a writer for Mockingbird Ministries.
Oh, excellent. Welcome, Sarah. We also have another guest with us, too, and that is Ben Courchesne. Ben, where are you and what are you up to?
I am about 150 feet from you right now, I imagine, in my office on the campus of Episcopal High School, where I am an English teacher. And I'm happy to say that this podcast is my last homework assignment before summer vacation.
Excellent. Oh, we can all just smell summer here for sure. Well, friends, as we are descending nearer and closer to summer, depending on what neck of the woods you live in, this is our 63rd episode of Popping Collars. And today's topic has most recently been a big win for Hulu. It began life as a book in 1985, and then a quickly forgotten about movie 5 years later, and now is finding another footing in a different time as a streaming series. We are talking about Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, a woman forced surrogacy in a dystopian future. So up front, we should name that the book and the series have similarities, but also some noted differences that people online jump up and down about. I think, for Bible nerds, they've already referenced, the Jacob and Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah and all of this story. I always hope my kids can recognize when popular culture and faith come together. And this is just a touchstone show, a touchstone series.
Okay, so I haven't read The Handmaid's Tale, but what I have read that this show makes me think of is The Red Tent. And it's a midrashic sort of telling of the Jacob story from the perspective of Dinah, his one daughter. So that story, is about Leah and about Rachel, but it also has Bilhah and Zilpah as really central characters to the plot, whereas they're just kind of afterthoughts in the Bible. Like, I think what this show makes us confront is the fact that no one's really an afterthought. Like, everybody's story matters, right? And that's what institutional slavery, sexual slavery, the way that we see it play out in the world today, that's what it always reinforces this idea that, oh, well, these are people whose lives don't matter. These are people who don't matter, but everybody matters. And I think that that's sort of the thrust of the show that I think is hard to watch and yet is important for us to sort of notice, I think, as we go.
One thing I'm always fascinated by in the church is how we revere certain women in scripture and then don't pay any attention to the others. And it's fascinating to me how much we revere Sarah, and then, we just negate the fact that she threw Hagar and a baby out in the desert on their own because she got mad. I mean, it is that. I love that idea that we forget, because we forget that whole concept entirely, that we forget that everyone has their own narrative running and everyone has their own life that they're living, and so many lives are sort of squandered for the sake of others.
Yeah, I really liked how the show, through its first 6 episodes, has given us a whole bunch of Offred and allowing us to see this as her story, but has also started to shift a little bit and show us a little bit of what it's like to be one of the wives, the ladies who wear green, or what it might be like to be on the outside of Gilead. The ambassador from Mexico coming in, and she's faced with this real problem of her country being, infertile, and no children being born there, and her having to face leading that country and that community.
Well, in the politics of it, the show has gotten, they're like, oh, well, this is a commentary on where life is now. And, people marching in January with signs that said, make Margaret Atwood's work fiction, that kind of stuff, that it's finding, even though, written in 1985, it's finding echoes in the culture. And I think that's because what Margaret Atwood tends to write always echoes in the culture. She doesn't consider any of this fiction. Mm-hmm. This could all happen.
Yeah, in fact,
it's very plausible.
She thought of it as a remix, not a fantasy. She was basically, she wrote the book in West Berlin in 1984, just surrounded by a wall. Understanding very much, even if just subconsciously, what it was like to live in a society that felt very much like you were being watched, like you were under control. And so I love thinking about the way that is playing underneath the story, even as we're seeing echoes of modern U.S. politics in what's happening. There's also, we're being brought back to the 80s, and then we could probably go back decade after decade after decade and find communities that felt entrapped like this, or felt sort of artificially constructed.
From my perspective, watching the show anyway, the way that the story is told is basically like the whole of Elizabeth Moss's face, right? It's just everything's so in close up. And the times of the show that I really love is when she flashes that defiant look, which she does a lot. And because I think that's like, there's something about the human spirit that wants to defy, I think, like more than anything, just wants to defy like whatever system you've got. I love those moments where her eyes just cut.
The worst episode for me to watch, because I think it would be my version of hell, is when she's locked in the room, is when she has to stay in a room and she's in the closet and she finds the carving, and just that ability to just have you be in your room, and they can't read. There's no reading. There's no anything. And you're just waiting to be released from the room. How you have no control over your person. And I think, and talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and things, that control over your body, having your body be able to be violated at any moment and feeling at risk and in fear, and what that constant exposure does to you, and how you detach some from yourself.
Do you know the connection? And I'm not smart enough to have read this somewhere, but I think I heard it on public radio as I gather all my intelligent information these days.
Yes.
But that Margaret Atwood had this relative who was a woman that was, they tried to hang her in the Salem witch trials. Do y'all know this?
Yes.
What? No.
So she had this relative. Her name was Mary Webster. And Mary had been accused of, witchcraft, and some man had died, and, Mary was going to take the fall for it. And so what Margaret Atwood discovered in her research was that they tried to hang Mary, and they found her alive the next morning.
Oh, my God.
So Margaret Atwood wrote this incredible poem called Half Hanged Mary that you can look up, and it's just fantastic. Yeah. But it's sort of about, it really rings of the kind of defiance that we see in the main character and June's character. And I think she dedicates The Handmaid's Tale, again, haven't read the book, but I think she may dedicate it to Mary Webster. So anyway, it's worth looking up. It's pretty fascinating.
Oh. Well, and all the hanging that's in the show. I mean, that's how we're dealing with everybody, is hanging, and very much the echoes, particularly when Ofglen's lover is hung, of the pictures that we see from other countries where people are hung by with cranes and things like that,
or from this country. I mean, so I majored in Southern Studies at Ole Miss, which is you don't get any more Southern than that. And the first couple of classes we had, they had us look at those, when they used to hang Black people in Mississippi, it was like a fun town get together. And so
Right.
terrifying photographs of Black people hanging in just small white children in picnic baskets underneath. And, it was imperative that they show that to a student body of mostly white students, so that we understood what we were getting ourselves into in this study, and understood what the cost had been for so many people, as you said earlier, and having no control over their bodies at that point in time. So, yeah, I can't watch The Handmaid's Tale without thinking about the South. I mean,
Yeah.
good Lord.
Yeah. I could see someone watching episode 1 and maybe 2 of this show and thinking, this is bleak, man. Like, there is no hope here. And I wonder, like, we're 7 episodes into, I think, a 10 episode first season. At this point, do you think this is a hopeful story? Like, do you think that this will ultimately be a liberating story?
It's like when everybody talks about the Holocaust, like we all would have done something, when there were plenty of like good Christian Lutherans who opened their front door, peeked out and went, you know what, I'm good, shut it and went back inside and waited for it to pass. I don't tend to be hopeful about humanity, which is, not one of my most charming qualities, but
at this point, being hopeful would just mean that humanity continues through procreation, and I mean, it's that dire in this world, right? Like, the humanity is dying off. I'm not even sure I would use hope to qualified continuation, but I'm trying to put myself into a position where fundamentally you're looking at a 60-year die-off of an entire species, and everything you know and love, everything you believe. I guess coming out of that, okay, there's a way to see that as hopeful, as if things will continue. But I don't know if hope is the warm fuzzy word that I would use.
Well, I think when we talked about the resiliency, like, there is hope in that eye flash of Offred's, right? And now, having seen, because, this is popping collars, we don't have to say spoiler alert, but in seeing her husband alive and working to find her, and I love that they waited on that. They could have given that to you like episode 3. Wait. And they really, if you're hanging on, Greg, I think you're right. Like, you're into this, into what this might look like. But Sarah, what you were talking about in terms of referencing the Holocaust, I was in my poking around and reading and researching for this. The Atlantic has loved writing about the show. They've done some really good pieces. They do a great piece on guilt about the show. And they talked a lot about the idea of complicity in this world, that there's this element of, like, when June's being fired from her job and everyone's being fired and the guy's just standing there going, everyone made me do it. I can't do anything about it. I'm sorry. Yeah, and that they reference along the way in the flashbacks as the world is deteriorating. We should have done something when this happened. We should have done something when this happened. We should have run when this happened. And then that very disturbing element of the salvaging, where all the handmaids kill that guy who raped a handmaid. Evidently, that's what they were told, right? So it just, that element of, when we pray in the church, the evil we have done and the evil done on our behalf, like, they're really dragging you in to be complicit in the slow takedown of, as Ben said, all that you know and love. And I find that to be the thing that hits me most pointedly as somebody living today and thinking about my life today.
It's funny, like, we're talking about being complicit. I think, what was even the context? I mean, we don't have, that's such a new thing to think about. I mean, not just in our day-to-day interactions and seeing laws change in this country, but also just like the amount of global information we have that we're complicit in right now is, it's just our wretched estate. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like, human trafficking is a perfect example, right? I mean, it's like you have a Super Bowl or you have Olympics, and all of a sudden a massive amount of people use that as an opportunity to exploit other human beings and, like, sell them on the market. And that's information that, in like 1950, whatever, we wouldn't have necessarily known out in the open, but now with the amount of information that we have, we know that these large events are events where people are trafficked. And yet Super Bowl is still the highest rated show, of the year. Olympics are still pulling in big bucks. They're still talking cities into doing it, even though Rio is in a state of decline as a result of having been bankrupted by this thing. I mean, it's just the amount of exploitation, the amount of stuff that we know now, and yet are still willing to participate because, well, there's got to be an Olympics. There's got to be a Super Bowl. There's got to be all this stuff, right? And yeah, some people are going to get hurt in the process, but oh well, entertainment's entertainment.
That's part of what's core to how Gilead works, which is thinking about people as means to an end, right? That's the entire plight of the handmaids, right? Is they are a means to somebody else's end, and they are not imagined as beings with ends and lives and goals and desires and internal worlds of their own.
We just honored a woman here who has done work in human trafficking here at school. And she encouraged people to take the slavery footprint quiz that you can take online to see how many slaves are working for you in your footprint. So I have 55 slaves who are working for me in my footprint based off of owning your car and the clothes I own and the amount of things I own and the phone I own and all of those sorts of things. And that sort of, you get that information, then you're kind of like, what am I going to do with that? How do I activate that out in the world? And I'm super jazzed that our kids here are really activated about it. And what can we do? How do we get involved in this? And how do we move forward? But that I think the scope and scale of what human trafficking looks like now, just to kind of have someone really lay it out for you and to then say, these are the slaves who are working for me. To how do I own it?
The interesting thing to me, though, about this question of being complicit is that, if you were to ask a citizen of Gilead, one of these elite people, they would actually say that their lives are not complicit at all. And that's sort of where we get into this danger theologically in any major religion, where we're we will be the Pharisees. We will have all these laws and get all of it right. We will fix everything about ourselves, right? There's this great, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's this great evangelical radio preacher from the 50s. And he had this sermon where he's like, when the children are all home by 5 p.m. and dinner's on the table and no one drinks alcohol and everyone uses kind words, then you'll know the devil is in charge.
Right.
So it's this kind of this question of being complicit and sort of thinking through all our choices is really fascinating, because I think it's also very dangerous, because we just don't have that much control.
It's fascinating to think about the character of the Mexican ambassador. She's there thinking about whether or not her country is going to enter into this trade agreement with Gilead. You're trading chocolate for people, right? And she's a likable character in so many ways. And you see her as or at least I see her as a sensitive, sort of humane character. And yet she still gets herself to a place where she is willing to make the deal, make the trade.
That sometimes I just get kind of lost in the effects that fertility can have and infertility can have on a relationship. Because the value on fertility in the Bible is huge, right? Because it's about descendants, it's about covenant, it's about continuing, it's about God's promise and God showing love, and love equals babies.
Right, because it's about a people. Yeah, it's a story about a people. You have to have people to do the story. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, because how are you going to be in the God Squad? You have to be born in the God Squad. We're not converting anybody to Judaism. You have to be born in. And I was telling Greg, I was just started reading about it for using it in my Bible class, the Rob Bell book, What is the Bible? And he has one of his opening chapters is about how when Moses died, the translation is he still had clear vision, strong vision, and he had strengthened his body, right? And the Hebrew word for strength is lido, which also translates into moisture. Mm-hmm. And that he then traces that back through, that's actually still about sex. It's still about the ability to be strong in your body so that, Moses can still get it up.
Yeah.
Even though he's just died at 120, whatever years old he was. So it's just that biblical emphasis, being able to be fertile, very fertile.
Betsy, what you're talking about, like the virility there, right? Like in the way that's important. There's also something sort of biological and natural, and we haven't even talked about desire in this story, and the way that it's sort of starting to peek through with the commander sort of grabbing the leg during the ceremony, or the way that other individuals in the story are expressing passion and desire and hiding it. The stories are becoming a kind of thin mask for other kinds of human interactions. I don't know but how the story is for me getting thinner and thinner. The devoutness of the players behind Gilead is a little threadbare as the season's going on. I don't know if others are feeling that way, or if that's just a take. But I'm starting to see some chinks in the armor of the higher ups.
Mm.
Yeah, I was fascinated by that. I loved the moment of intimacy between the commander and his wife, which I didn't read the book, but it seems like sex between them must be forbidden because they can't make babies. Like it felt like this thing of like, well, we shouldn't be doing this, but we're going to do this. But then they just let themselves do it. And, I tend to work in a sort of a theological construct of like law versus gospel. And it's so fascinating to watch, like the harder the law gets pushed down, like the more people are like just grasping for some freedom, even people who are running the show, who are laying down the law, right, are still grasping for this freedom.
So Betsy, when you first started this conversation, we were talking about the text, the scriptural text that kind of oversees this story is the Jacob and Rachel text. I mean, that's what they have to read before essentially Alfred gets raped every month, right?
Yep.
That's the scripture that's being read. I was thinking when we were talking about that defiant look, there's something a little bit of Job in the story too. Now, certainly because of the suffering and all of that stuff, but there's this sense that, something horrible is happening to you and it's not your fault. And it's okay for you to say, this is horrible and it's happening to me and it's not my fault, and F off because this is happening to me. Right. Like right. I think that Job is an amazing example of humanity sort of standing up to God and saying, screw you for this, right? Because ultimately that's the place where we kind of can stand. And we didn't conquer the Leviathan, and we didn't create the world and all of that other stuff that God says to Job in that book. But what humanity can do is stand in defiance of God. Like, we do have that power, and I sort of see that in Offred's. In those close-ups of Offred, just sort of saying, this isn't the world. This isn't the world that we need, and this isn't the world that I need to live in. Like, I can defy this. I can defy whatever is created. All of this, like, I love the way that Sarah framed it, right? All of this law that's coming at me, I can be that gospel, like, rising up out of this.
Yeah, it's that when she got to freak out in the car, when she got to just bang in the car and let it off. Atwood has talked about, she said that there's no such thing as literal interpretation of the Bible. Everything is interpretation. Everything, it's not just saying we're going to follow everything here frame by frame, word by word. It's all about a creation that's inside a framework and a mindset. So that what we're seeing is a creation and a framework inside a fertility crisis. And this is what this looks like. And a fertility crisis brought on by, we're not even quite sure what.
When I was a kid, my parents are both in agriculture, and my parents are like weirdly liberal for being from Mississippi. And my dad had this farmer over, and I was sitting at y'all feel free to cut this because I'm rambling, but I was sitting before the television as a teenager, and I'm watching MTV, and there's like Boys to Men on, something like that. And so this farmer looks at my dad, and he said, don't you miss how it was back in the good old days? With the subtext being like when black people were on television. And my dad looked at him and he said, son, in the good old days, people died of the common cold.
There were writers for the Federalist or a fundamentalist organization that are watching The Handmaid's Tale with interest because they think it It is a horrific sort of a depiction of the way that gay men in this country are using surrogate women to have their babies, right? And is a way to like see exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
What's going on?
With my sort of English teacher hat on, the idea that, interpretation is a choice. You're responsible for the choices you make. You're responsible for the interpretations you bring to the text, and then by extension to the world. And we are living. The thing about Gilead is it's somebody's interpretation made real. That's the nightmare. That's the horror of that situation. Is that it's a world where there is pure interpretation. It's one interpretation.
This chain is getting to me. You made a slave, I want to be set free. Our work, there is no we. Your world is you, I wish that you would see. I don't have money, ain't got a name. All I got from you is $1 or two and a woman around to blame. I don't have money, I don't have fame. All I got's my word and this here bird and a woman around to blame. This way.
Okay, we're gonna hope it doesn't conk out.
Is weighing me down.
All right, so this is the point of the show when we do what I forget what name we settled on for this.
We settled on staff picks because we decided employee sounds too authoritative or too strict.
Handmaid's picks. There's a little too much authority happening. Let's not do that. So
staff sounds friendlier.
It does. This harkens back to your Blockbuster video that has, I'm really into what Serena's into. She's really funky in that Cure t-shirt, and she seems to pick cool movies. So Greg, you had something you wanted to recommend to the team.
I do. And I have something to recommend that's not a television show, and it's not a movie, and it's not a book. I have music to recommend for a change. Like we rarely recommend music on this show. So here's the thing. I know Betsy is one of these people. You run into these bands every now and then that you just decide like this band has tapped into something inside of you, and you're going to stick with them no matter what, no matter where they go, no matter what they do. You're just going to get their stuff. Do you know how much I paid for U2 tickets next week? You're referencing that, aren't you?
Okay, yes. Who is it?
The Gorillaz. The Gorillaz have a new album out called Humans. I got to tell you. So I love the Gorillaz. This is their 4th album. 26 songs on this whole album that they put out of all this material that they've amassed. And anyway, it's all about hip hop, and it's all about dance, and it's all about R&B and soul and a little bit of British new wave in there. It's so fabulous the way that the music can turn on a dime and change from one genre to another and mix a few things and shake a few things up, and what comes out is all of this sort of experimental, really hypnotizing music. I have been in the bag for the Gorillaz ever since they started, and wholeheartedly recommend. Please go to Spotify right now. Check out their new album. It's fabulous. It's glorious. It's called Humans by the Gorillaz. So that's my pick for this time.
Who Sarah and Ben? Who is the band that you will follow to the end of the world if you had to kind of have your band? That no matter what anybody says, you love them.
This is like the lamest Christian answer. Kirk Franklin, the gospel singer, I'll buy anything that man does. I've listened to him since I was a geeky kid in Mississippi, in the theater club, and we would play him at the after party for our cast shows. And it was that one time where like all the nerdy kids and like the closeted kids whose dads are Baptist preachers could just like cut loose to some gospel music. So yeah, I'll buy anything that man makes.
Nice.
Is that like, do you want a revolution stuff? Like,
I want a revolution every morning. My kids are in the car like, it's so loud. I'm like, do you want a revolution?
I have really, really incredible memories of driving in an IROC T-top with my dad and listening to Bruce Springsteen. And I have not really worked through all of that yet, but for some reason I will listen to Bruce Springsteen no matter what, anywhere. I'm always looking for different versions of the same songs. So I have no idea what the source of it is, but Bruce is in my heart.
So this has been our episode of Popping Collars. I want to thank Ben and thank Sarah for being with us. Thank you for talking some handmaids with us. You can find Popping Collars in all the places that you get your podcast needs met. That can be Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, whatever. We also come to you on Episcopal Cafe. We love Episcopal Cafe, and we know that you will too. Please watch us there and get all your Episcopal news needs met there as well. Rate and review our podcast. It's a great way to help people find us. So thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Greg, for joining us on this episode.
keep those calories up.